I want you to pause for a moment because what is happening around Greenland is not a normal geopolitical crisis. No invasion, no provocation, no emergency, and yet suddenly a fault line has opened inside the Western Alliance. This crisis was not triggered by Russia, not by China, not by resource scarcity or military threat. It was manufactured by the United States itself. For the first time in modern history, Washington is pressuring its closest allies not for access, not for cooperation, but for ownership. That distinction matters, because when an alliance leader begins to treat sovereignty like a transaction, something deeper breaks. Trust, credibility, the invisible architecture that held the post-war order together for 80 years. If this can happen to Denmark and Europe, it can happen anywhere. If this concerns you, stay with me, subscribe, and listen carefully. Because to understand where this leads, we first have to understand how a crisis like this is created out of nothing. To see the real problem, we have to strip away the headlines. This is not a debate about security. Not really. It is a conflict about logic. On one side, the United States is advancing a claim framed around necessity. Strategic location, Arctic access, future competition with China and Russia. On the other side, Denmark, Greenland, and the broader European Union are saying something very different. They are not saying no to cooperation. They are not saying no to American presence. They are saying no to the idea that sovereignty itself is negotiable. That distinction is the core of this crisis, because alliances are built on shared purpose, not on transfer of title. Europe is willing to provide what actually matters: military access, economic cooperation, even participation in developing rare earths. What they reject is the symbolism of being owned, and that is where the tension escalates, because when one side asks for control and the other offers access, compromise becomes structurally impossible. And that brings us to how we got here in the first place. To understand how unnatural this moment is, we have to look backward, because history gives us a very clear answer here. During the Cold War, the United States defended all of Western Europe, not by owning it, but by committing to it. American troops were stationed across Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom. None of those countries were American territory. Deterrence worked because alliances worked. The same logic applies today. The United States deters China from attacking Taiwan without owning Taiwan. It projects power through presence, through treaties, through credibility. So the idea that you must own land in order to defend it has no historical basis. It represents a regression, a return to a mercantilist view of power where territory equals security. That model collapsed in the 20th century. The modern international system was built to replace it, and yet the Greenland dispute revives this outdated logic, placing acquisition above cooperation. That is why this moment feels destabilizing. It contradicts everything that made the alliance system function, and once that logic breaks, consequences follow. The timing of this crisis is not accidental. Greenland is becoming more valuable because the world itself is changing. Ice is melting, shipping lanes are opening, land once locked away is becoming accessible. Climate change is reshaping the Arctic, even as parts of the US administration deny the science behind it. As access increases, so do incentives. Rare earths, critical minerals, strategic depth, all of this makes Greenland more important. But here is the paradox. As regions open up, stability matters more, not less. Managing new sea routes and resources requires coordination, rules, trust. Europe understands this. That is why Denmark and Greenland are willing to expand cooperation, to allow deeper military access, to support joint economic development. What they resist is forceful acquisition, because destabilizing an opening region creates exactly the risk everyone claims to fear: This is where a strategic opportunity becomes a strategic mistake. Instead of strengthening alliances at a moment of transition, the United States injected friction, and that friction does not stay local, it spreads, which is why the next stage of this crisis is far more dangerous than it appears. At the center of this confrontation lies a deeper misunderstanding, a confusion between control and influence. The United States already has what it needs. Europe is offering expanded military presence, secure access to infrastructure, joint development of rare earths and critical supply chains. In strategic terms, that is power. Ownership adds very little, but symbolism adds a lot, because demanding ownership reframes the relationship from partnership to dominance, and that changes how allies behave. When sovereignty is treated as a commodity, trust collapses. This is why European leaders are not reacting emotionally. They are reacting structurally. They understand that if this precedent stands, no territory is truly safe from renegotiation, so they are choosing resistance over accommodation, not to block cooperation, but to preserve the rules that make cooperation possible. This is the hidden mechanism of the crisis, not security, but the erosion of the invisible contracts that hold alliances together. Once those contracts weaken, pressure does not disappear. It escalates. And that escalation leads us directly into the next breaking point. This is where the situation turns dangerous, because strategy is no longer theoretical. Europe has a move. It can reinforce Greenland physically, militarily, visibly. At the same time, it can place a generous offer on the table, expanded U.S. access, formal security guarantees, economic cooperation written in public ink. That combination changes the game. It forces the United States into a binary choice: accept access without ownership, or escalate against a NATO ally. There is no third option. If Washington refuses the offer and Europe asserts control, any further pressure becomes confrontation. Not diplomatic, but physical. And that is a line that should never exist inside an alliance. It is hard to imagine an American president ordering hostilities against Europe, which is why this is a losing position for the United States. Europe can call the bluff. But the fact that this bluff exists at all reveals how badly the system has already degraded, because alliances are not supposed to function like standoffs. And once they do, something essential is already broken. Now bring this closer, because this is no longer abstract. This reaches you. When trust inside an alliance erodes, the cost is not paid by diplomats. It is paid by citizens, by higher defense spending, by economic uncertainty, by a world that feels less predictable every year. You are watching a system that kept peace for decades begin to fray. When Article 5 becomes conditional, deterrence weakens. And when deterrence weakens, risk moves closer to everyday life. Europe understands this. That is why this moment feels existential. If allies cannot rely on each other automatically, they must prepare alone. That means duplication, fragmentation, more fear. This is not about Greenland. It is about whether rules still protect smaller states, whether power still comes with responsibility. If this concerns you, don't look away. Share this, stay engaged, because what breaks quietly at the top always echoes downward. And the next ripple does not stop at borders. What happens in Greenland does not stay in the Arctic, because alliances are ecosystems. When stress appears in one place, it propagates outward, across Europe, across NATO, across every partner watching from the outside. This dispute is being read carefully in Asia, in Taiwan, in capitals that depend on American guarantees. The question they are asking is simple. If the United States can pressure its closest allies over sovereignty, what does a security promise really mean? That uncertainty is destabilizing. Deterrence works only when commitments are automatic, when hesitation is unthinkable. But when alliances become transactional, every guarantee acquires a price tag. That changes global behavior. Rivals probe more aggressively. Partners hedge more defensively. The system shifts from rules to improvisation, and improvisation favors disruption. This is how local disputes become global fractures, not through explosions, but through doubt. Once doubt enters the system, it compounds. And that is why the Greenland crisis matters far beyond Europe. It signals a world where predictability is fading. And when predictability fades, history tells us what usually comes next. From here, the future branches, not into certainty, but into scenarios. The first path is stabilization, a shift in leadership, a return to alliance logic, access without ownership. In this scenario, cooperation deepens quietly, trust does not fully return, but damage is contained. The second path is managed drift. The rhetoric softens, the structures remain strained. Europe builds parallel capabilities. America stays involved, but at arm's length. The alliance survives, but thinner, more conditional. Then there is the third path, escalation. Not open conflict, but permanent fracture. Europe reorients strategically. U.S. guarantees are treated as variables. Security becomes regional, fragmented, more expensive. None of these paths restore the old order. That era is gone. The real question is not which future we prefer. It is which future current decisions are locking in. Because systems don't collapse suddenly, they erode. And by the time the consequences feel obvious, the choices are already made. What began as a question about Greenland ends as a verdict on an era. This was never about land, or minerals, or military basing. It was about whether the rules still matter. The pursuit of ownership fractured something deeper than diplomacy. It fractured confidence. And once trust breaks at the core of an alliance, it does not reset with a press conference. Europe has learned a lesson it cannot unlearn. That security promised can become security negotiated, that guarantees can turn conditional. This is the Humpty Dumpty moment of the transatlantic order. The pieces may still sit near each other, but the shape is gone. From here on, Europe will hedge, build, prepare for unpredictability. And the United States will discover that leadership once questioned is hard to reclaim. History will not remember this as a real estate episode. It will remember it as the moment an alliance stopped being automatic. If you want to understand how power is really shifting in this world, stay with this channel, subscribe,